A single sentence in a forgotten language can awaken memories that decades of silence never could. Most people never notice the background voices. The waitress asking if anyone needed more coffee. The mother reminding her little boy to stay close. The soft music drifting through an old Italian restaurant on a rainy afternoon. Neither did I. Not at first. I had worked at Bellucci's Trattoria for almost 3 years, long enough to memorize every crack in the brick walls and every family photograph hanging above the wooden booths. The place wasn't luxurious, but it felt like home. Warm lights reflected off polished wine glasses. The scent of fresh basil and garlic filled the air. Elderly couples lingered over espresso while tourists laughed over oversized plates of pasta. It was the kind of place where ordinary lives quietly unfolded. I preferred it that way. Mom. A small tug on my apron pulled me back. Noah looked up at me with wide green eyes, his blonde hair falling across his forehead. I'm hungry again. I smiled despite the exhaustion in my bones. You ate 20 minutes ago. I grew. His answer was so serious that I couldn't help laughing. You grow every 20 minutes? He nodded confidently. I'm 6. Apparently, that explained everything. I crouched beside him and brushed a crumb from the corner of his mouth. I'll bring you another breadstick. You promise? I always do. His smile made every double shift worth surviving. Being a single mother wasn't the life I had imagined, but it was mine, and Noah had never once let me regret choosing him over everything else. The bell above the entrance chimed. Every conversation inside the restaurant seemed to fade at once. Not because someone famous had walked in, because someone powerful had. 6 men entered together. Dark tailored suits, polished shoes, expressions too calm to belong to ordinary businessmen. The last man walked in several seconds later. Tall, broad shoulders, dark hair brushed neatly back. A well-groomed beard framed a face carved from quiet authority. Black ink disappeared beneath the sleeves of his charcoal suit whenever he moved. He didn't look around the restaurant. He didn't need to. The room seemed to notice him before he noticed it. Table 12. My manager's voice sounded unusually tense. Olivia. I looked up. You'll take care of them. I blinked. Me? He swallowed. They requested our best service. I glanced toward the group. Something about them unsettled me. Not fear. More like the feeling that every person in the room had unconsciously begun speaking a little softer. I picked up 6 menus and forced a professional smile. Good afternoon. The men barely looked at me. Only the man seated at the center lifted his eyes. Cold blue. Sharp. Observant. He studied me for less than 2 seconds before returning to the menu in his hands. No curiosity. No interest. Just quiet control. My name is Olivia. I kept my voice steady. I'll be taking care of your table today. One of the men ordered immediately. Another requested wine. The bearded man said nothing. Not even once. As I wrote everything down, Noah wandered from the corner booth where he'd been coloring with crayons. Before I could stop him, he stumbled against a chair. A glass slipped from a nearby table. It shattered across the wooden floor. The entire restaurant turned. Noah froze. His little face turned pale. I'm sorry. His tiny voice trembled. Without thinking, without even realizing what language I had chosen, I hurried to him, knelt beside the broken glass, and gently cupped his face. It's all right, amore. I smiled softly. Non avere pora. Don't be afraid. Mama eka. Mommy is here. You didn't mean to. Noah's breathing slowed almost immediately. He nodded. I know. I kissed the top of his head before asking him to wait by the counter while I cleaned the broken pieces. The restaurant slowly returned to its conversations. Or so I thought. Because when I finally stood, the man at table 12 was no longer reading the menu. His chair had moved back. His hands rested motionless on the table. Those piercing blue eyes were fixed entirely on me. Not with recognition. Not yet. But with the stunned expression of someone who had just heard a voice he thought had been buried forever. Then, in a tone so quiet that only the men seated beside him could hear, he asked a single question. Who taught her to speak Italian? Sometimes the past doesn't knock on your door. It quietly sits across the room, waiting for you to recognize its voice. I didn't notice the way the restaurant had changed. Not immediately. To me, it was still another busy afternoon. The espresso machine hissed behind the counter. Plates clinked against polished wooden tables. The scent of baked rosemary bread drifted from the kitchen. Life continued exactly as it had 5 minutes earlier. Only, The man at table 12 wasn't eating. He hadn't touched the wine that had just been poured. His fingers rested loosely around the crystal glass, but his attention remained fixed on me. Not in the way some customers stared. Not with admiration. Not with curiosity. With disbelief. As though I had accidentally spoken the name of someone long dead. I forced myself to look away. There you go. I knelt beside Noah, brushing a few tiny pieces of glass away from his sneakers. Stay by the counter this time, okay? He nodded immediately. I'm sorry, Mom. You don't have to apologize for being 6. His small smile returned. I'll color. Good idea. After making sure he was safe, I carried a fresh basket of bread toward table 12. Professional. Calm. Completely unaware that every step brought me closer to changing my life. Your bread. I placed the basket carefully in the center of the table. Would you like a few more minutes before ordering? No one answered. Not at first. The men sitting around the table exchanged brief glances, silently waiting for someone else to speak. Finally, the bearded man looked up. What did you say to the boy? His voice was low, controlled, almost gentle. I blinked. I'm sorry. When the glass broke. He held my gaze. You spoke another language. Oh. I smiled politely. Italian. You speak it fluently. It wasn't a question. I shook my head. Not really. Enough to comfort a frightened child. Something about the way he said it made my heartbeat quicken. I only know a few phrases. Who taught them to you? The question came so quickly that it almost felt rehearsed. I hesitated. My grandmother. He remained perfectly still. Your grandmother? My adoptive grandmother. The words slipped out naturally. I was adopted when I was little. For the first time, something changed in his eyes. Not surprise. Recognition. One of the men beside him quietly leaned closer. Boss. The warning was barely audible. The bearded man ignored him. Do you remember your birth parents? I frowned. No. My grandmother said they died before I could remember them. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. And your grandmother? Is she still alive? The question felt strangely personal. I lowered my eyes. She passed away 3 years ago. I'm sorry. The words sounded sincere. Unexpectedly sincere. Before I could respond, another waiter hurried toward me. Olivia. He whispered urgently. Table 7 needs their check. I'll be right there. I gave the mysterious customer an apologetic smile. I should get back to work. He nodded once. Of course. I turned away, yet I could still feel his eyes following me across the restaurant. As I handed another family their receipt, my manager suddenly appeared beside me. His face looked unusually pale. What happened? I asked. He swallowed. The gentleman at table 12. What about him? He just bought the restaurant. I laughed. Very funny. I'm serious. My smile faded. What? He called the owner 5 minutes ago. The paperwork is already being prepared. I stared at him. That's impossible. He hasn't even finished lunch. I know. My manager looked toward table 12 before lowering his voice. And he left one instruction. A strange uneasiness settled in my chest. What instruction? My manager hesitated. Then, almost reluctantly, he answered. He said. His eyes met mine. Make sure the young woman and her son don't leave until I've spoken to her again. Some decisions look like obsession from the outside, until you learn they were actually promises made to the dead. I don't understand. The words escaped before I could stop them. My manager looked almost as confused as I felt. Neither do I. He rubbed the back of his neck. The owner called me himself. He said the restaurant now belongs to Mr. Russo. I glanced toward table 12 again. Damian Russo. For the first time, I silently repeated his name. It fit him. Strong. Controlled. Unforgettable. There has to be some mistake. I wish there was. My manager lowered his voice even further. He paid in full. Without negotiating. In less than 4 minutes. That sounded impossible. Who bought a restaurant simply because a waitress spoke another language? No one. Unless the restaurant had never been the reason. Before I could think any further, Noah tugged gently on my sleeve. Mom. I looked down. Are we in trouble? His tiny face was serious. Children always sensed tension long before adults admitted it existed. I forced a smile. No. Just a strange customer. He nodded slowly. Is he angry? I followed his eyes toward Damian. The Mafia Boss wasn't looking at me anymore. He was watching Noah. Not coldly. Not intensely. Quietly. Almost. Sadly. No. I whispered. I don't think he is. My manager cleared his throat. He wants to speak with you. Tell him I'm working. He already knows. I still have tables. He bought those too. I stared at him. What? The owner told everyone to finish serving. Then go home. The restaurant is closing early. None of this felt real. Around us, customers quietly paid their bills. The cooks began cleaning the kitchen. Chairs were stacked. The front doors were locked. Within 15 minutes, the lively restaurant had become strangely empty, except for one table. Table 12. Damian remained seated exactly where he had been, as though he had all the time in the world. Noah squeezed my hand. I'm scared. I knelt beside him. You don't have to be. Will you stay with me? Always. I kissed his forehead before standing. Every instinct told me to leave, to walk away, to disappear before this mysterious man could ask another question. But another feeling stopped me. Curiosity. I walked slowly toward table 12. The other men immediately stood. Every one of them. Not because I had arrived. Because Damian had. He rose with calm precision. Tall enough that I suddenly felt much smaller than I actually was. He dismissed the others with a simple glance. Outside. No arguments. No hesitation. Within seconds, every man had left the room. Only the three of us remained. Damian, Noah, me. The silence stretched between us. Finally, he spoke. My name is Damian Russo. I know. You've heard of me. It wasn't arrogance. It sounded like resignation. I've heard stories. They're usually worse than the truth. I wasn't sure whether to believe that. He looked toward Noah. What's your name? Noah. The little boy answered before I could. Damian nodded once. That's a good name. Noah smiled shyly. My mom picked it. I imagine she makes good decisions. His eyes lifted to mine again. I'd like to ask you something. If it's about my family. I don't know much. I expected that. His answer surprised me. You did? Yes. He reached slowly inside his jacket. My heart skipped. But instead of a weapon, he removed an old photograph. Its edges were worn. The colors had faded with time. He placed it gently on the table between us. It showed a smiling young woman standing beside a stone fountain somewhere in Italy. Dark hair. Kind eyes. She looked impossibly familiar. I frowned. I've never seen her before. I know. Damian's voice became almost inaudible. But when you spoke Italian, his fingers rested lightly on the photograph. You sounded exactly like her. I looked back at the picture, then at him. Who is she? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, for the first time since we'd met, the most feared man in the room looked as though he was remembering someone he had never truly stopped missing. The hardest truths are never spoken first. They reveal themselves one heartbeat at a time. I couldn't stop staring at the photograph. The young woman smiled with the kind of warmth that made strangers feel like family. There was something familiar about her. Not her face. Not exactly. It was the feeling she carried. Safe. Gentle. As though I'd known her once in a dream I could no longer remember. I'm sorry. I looked back at Damian. I don't recognize her. I didn't expect you to. His voice remained calm, but his fingers tightened around the worn edges of the photograph. Her name was Isabella. The name lingered in the quiet restaurant. Italian. Yes. I nodded politely. I'm sorry for your loss. His eyes lowered to the picture. She died 22 years ago. Something inside me softened. There was no anger in his face. No self-pity. Only the exhaustion of someone who had carried grief for far too long. I'm sorry. I repeated. This time, I truly meant it. He carefully returned the photograph to his jacket. I have one more question. If I can answer it. When your grandmother taught you Italian. He paused. Did she ever sing to you? The question caught me completely off guard. A song? Yes. I frowned, searching through distant memories. My grandmother used to hum while she cooked. I never paid much attention. Can you remember any of it? I closed my eyes. For a few seconds. Nothing. Then, a melody. Soft. Gentle. Almost forgotten. Without thinking, I quietly hummed the first few notes. Only 4 short measures. When I opened my eyes again, Damian had gone completely still. Every trace of composure had disappeared. His breathing slowed. His jaw tightened. For one brief moment, he looked less like the most feared mafia boss in New York, and more like a little boy hearing his mother call his name. Boss. One of the bodyguards had quietly stepped back inside. His expression changed the moment he saw Damian's face. Is everything all right? Damian slowly raised one hand. The bodyguard immediately fell silent. I suddenly felt uncomfortable. Did I say something wrong? No. His answer came almost as a whisper. You remembered it perfectly. I didn't even know what I was singing. I know. He looked toward the windows where rain continued sliding down the glass. That lullaby was never recorded. I blinked. My grandmother sang it. So did Isabella. A chill traveled through my arms. There are thousands of Italian lullabies. There are. He agreed. But not that one. The room became impossibly quiet. Noah wandered over, holding one of his crayons. Mom. He tugged gently on my hand. Can we go home now? I smiled at him. Soon. Damian crouched until he was at Noah's eye level. His imposing presence seemed to disappear. Do you like drawing? Noah nodded enthusiastically. I'm drawing dinosaurs. I noticed. They're very good. Noah beamed. They're not finished. I hope you'll finish them. I will. The little exchange lasted less than 30 seconds. Yet something remarkable happened. Noah wasn't afraid of him. Children trusted instincts adults had learned to ignore. Damian stood again. I won't keep you much longer. Relief washed over me. Thank you. But his voice became serious. I need to know where you live. Every protective instinct inside me awakened. I instinctively pulled Noah a little closer. I'm not giving my address to a stranger. A faint smile appeared beneath Damian's beard. Good. I frowned. What? That's exactly the answer I hoped you'd give. Before I could understand what he meant, his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. The warmth disappeared from his face. His blue eyes turned cold again. One short message. That was all it took. He looked directly at the bodyguard. Get the cars. Then he turned back to me. His next words stole every bit of air from my lungs. It's too late. They already know I've found you. Fear doesn't always arrive with sirens. Sometimes it arrives with a single sentence spoken too calmly. They already know I've found you. The words echoed through the empty restaurant. I stared at Damian, waiting for him to explain. Instead, he slipped his phone back into his jacket and looked toward the rain-soaked windows. His expression had changed again. The grief I'd seen moments earlier was gone. In its place stood the man the city whispered about. Cold, focused, calculating. I don't understand. You don't have to. His answer came without hesitation. You only need to trust me for the next 10 minutes. I almost laughed. You expect me to trust a man I met less than an hour ago? No. He looked directly into my eyes. I expect you to trust your instincts. Before I could respond, one of his bodyguards hurried inside. Boss, the perimeter is clear. For now. Damian nodded once. Bring the car to the front entrance. The man disappeared without another word. Everything about them moved with quiet precision. No shouting. No panic. Just discipline. It made my pulse race even faster. I reached for Noah's hand. We're leaving. Damian didn't stop me. He simply asked, where will you go? My apartment. They'll be waiting there. I frowned. Who? The people who spent 22 years making sure no one ever found Isabella's family. I shook my head. You're talking about someone else's life. No. His voice softened. I'm talking about yours. Silence settled between us. I told you. I was adopted. I know. My parents died. That's what you were told. The certainty in his voice frightened me more than if he had shouted. No. I whispered. My grandmother would never lie to me. I don't believe she did. He took a slow breath. I believe she protected you. The front doors suddenly opened. A gust of cool air swept through the restaurant. Another man entered, dressed in a dark suit. Unlike the others, his face showed visible concern. He walked directly to Damian. We found the motorcycle. And it was parked across the street all afternoon. My stomach tightened. What motorcycle? Neither of them answered me immediately. The newcomer handed Damian a small envelope. Inside was a photograph. Damian looked at it for only a second before passing it to me. It showed the front of the restaurant, taken from across the street. The timestamp read less than 30 minutes earlier. I looked closer. There I was, standing beside Noah near the entrance. Someone had been watching us. Without realizing it, I pulled Noah against me. This isn't funny. It isn't supposed to be. Damian's voice remained steady. Noah. He knelt again until he was eye level with my son. Do you like adventures? Noah looked at me first. When I gave him a small nod, he smiled. I do. Good. Because I need you to be very brave for your mom. Noah puffed out his chest. I can do that. I know you can. There was something unexpectedly gentle in the way Damian spoke to him. Nothing forced. Nothing rehearsed. as though protecting children had once meant something deeply personal to him. I looked toward the windows again. A black sedan slowly rolled past the restaurant. Too slowly. Its dark windows reflected the rain. It didn't stop, but it didn't leave the block either. Damian followed my gaze. "There," he said quietly. "They're confirming you're still inside." I felt every ounce of color drain from my face. "You know them?" "I know how they work." He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "If I'm wrong, you'll lose one evening. But if I'm right," his eyes briefly shifted toward Noah, "you'll lose the only person who has ever called you mom." The restaurant suddenly felt far too small, far too exposed. For the first time since this impossible afternoon had begun, I stopped wondering whether Damian Russo was telling the truth. I started wondering what kind of people could make the most powerful man I'd ever met look genuinely afraid. Sometimes the safest place in the world is beside the person everyone else fears. I never imagined those words could become true. Yet there I stood, holding Noah's hand so tightly that he looked up at me with quiet concern. "Mom, it's okay." The lie came easily. Children deserved hope, even when adults had none. Damian glanced toward the black sedan outside. It hadn't moved. Neither had the second vehicle that had quietly stopped across the intersection. "They're patient," he spoke almost to himself. "They always wait until people believe they're safe." I followed his gaze. "I still don't understand who they are." "You will. But not here." He looked toward one of his men. "Marcus." The bodyguard stepped forward immediately. "The underground exit?" "Ready." "Underground?" I stared at Damian. "There's another exit?" "The previous owner built it decades ago." His expression remained unreadable. I was fortunate enough to learn about it 5 minutes after purchasing the restaurant. Even now, in the middle of all this uncertainty, his dry honesty caught me off guard. "You really bought an entire restaurant? Just to talk to me?" His eyes met mine. "No, I bought time." Before I could ask what he meant, Marcus returned carrying 2 raincoats. One small, one adult-sized. He handed them to Damian without a word. Damian crouched beside Noah. "I have something important to ask." Noah listened carefully. "I need you to wear this coat." "Why?" "So if anyone sees us, they won't notice your dinosaur shirt." Noah looked down at the bright green dinosaur printed across his chest. He smiled. "My favorite shirt." "I know." Damian smiled faintly. "Let's keep it safe." The warmth between them surprised me again. It wasn't forced. It wasn't manipulation. It felt natural, as though Damian had spoken to frightened children before. Many times. I helped Noah into the raincoat. Then Damian turned toward me. "I can't force you to come. If you walk out the front door, I won't stop you." The honesty in his voice made the decision even harder. "You'd really let us leave?" "Yes. And if you're wrong, I'll apologize and disappear from your lives forever." "And if you're right?" He looked at Noah before answering. "You'll both still be alive tomorrow." Silence settled between us. I searched his face for arrogance, for deception, for even the smallest sign that this was some elaborate scheme. I found none. Only urgency, only concern, only a man carrying a burden that somehow included me. Noah squeezed my fingers. "I like him. Children, always seeing what adults missed." I closed my eyes for one long breath. When I opened them again, "I'll come." Damian nodded once. "Thank you." He didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He simply moved. Marcus pulled aside a heavy wooden shelf near the kitchen. Behind it, a narrow steel door. Cold air drifted upward from a dimly lit staircase. This way, the bodyguards surrounded us without crowding us. Protective, professional, never touching us. As we descended into the tunnel, the sounds of the city slowly disappeared. Only our footsteps echoed against the concrete walls. Halfway down, Damian's phone vibrated again. He answered without slowing. "Report." His face hardened. "I see." A long pause. "No, they're already too late." He ended the call. I looked at him. "What happened?" He hesitated. "They entered your apartment." My heart stopped. "What?" "They used a duplicate key. They searched every room." I couldn't breathe. "My home." "They found it empty." He looked directly into my eyes. "If we had left 15 minutes earlier." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The image formed in my mind on its own. Noah sleeping in his room. Someone opening the front door. Someone searching for us. My knees nearly gave way. Without thinking, Damian steadied me with one careful hand beneath my elbow. Not possessive, not forceful, simply making sure I didn't fall. For the first time since meeting him, I realized something terrifying. The danger hadn't begun when Damian Russo walked into the restaurant. It had begun long before either of us knew the other existed. He had simply been the first person to see it coming. The truth doesn't become easier to hear just because you've escaped the people trying to hide it. The tunnel seemed endless. Cold concrete walls stretched ahead, illuminated only by small emergency lights mounted near the ceiling. Marcus led the way. 2 other bodyguards walked behind us. Damian stayed beside Noah and me. Not once did he rush us. Not once did he reach for my hand again. He simply remained close enough that I knew, if something happened, he would be the first to stand between us and danger. After nearly 10 minutes, the tunnel opened into an underground garage. 3 black SUVs waited with their engines already running. Rain echoed faintly through the ventilation shafts above. Marcus opened the rear door of the middle vehicle. "We're clear." Damian nodded. "Noah." He smiled gently. "Want to sit by the window?" Noah looked at me. I gave him a small nod. "Okay." He climbed inside, hugging his backpack against his chest. I followed, still trying to process everything that had happened in a single afternoon. Damian entered last. The doors closed. The outside world disappeared. The convoy moved silently through the underground exit before merging onto the evening streets. For several minutes, no one spoke. Noah eventually rested his head against the window, watching blurred city lights slide across the rain. Then he quietly fell asleep. His small hand never let go of mine. Damian lowered his voice. "He's exhausted. So am I." The words escaped before I could stop them. He understood. "I know." I turned toward him. "You owe me answers." "Yes. You've said that several times. And now I'm asking." His gaze remained on the rain outside. "Fair enough." He folded his hands together. "What I'm about to tell you isn't something I can prove with one photograph. Then tell me what you do know." He took a slow breath. 22 years ago, one Italian family disappeared. I've never heard of them. You weren't supposed to. His answer was calm. They stayed invisible because visibility meant death. I frowned. And what does that have to do with me? He looked directly at me. Everything. Silence settled inside the SUV. When I was 14, he continued quietly. My father worked with that family. I noticed he never used the word mafia. Only family. One night, there was an attack. His jaw tightened. I survived. They didn't. My heartbeat quickened. The woman in the photograph. Isabella. He nodded once. She saved my life. I remembered the picture. Her gentle smile. The warmth in her eyes. She pushed me through a hidden doorway before the shooting reached the house. His voice never trembled, but the pain behind it did. I never saw her again. I didn't interrupt. Some memories deserved silence. When everything was over, no bodies were identified. Only ashes. He looked down briefly. Except one child. I frowned. What child? They never found her. The words hung heavily between us. I felt something tightening inside my chest. You think. I don't think. He interrupted softly. I've spent 22 years looking. For a child? Yes. Why? His answer came without hesitation. Because I made Isabella a promise. Outside, thunder rolled across the dark sky. The windshield wipers moved steadily back and forth. I told her, if I lived, I would find her daughter. Every breath inside the vehicle suddenly felt louder. I stared at him, then slowly shook my head. No, my grandmother adopted me from Chicago. Those records could have been changed. My birthday certificate could have been replaced. My name could have been chosen. Each answer chipped away at the certainty I had carried my entire life. I looked down at Noah sleeping peacefully against my shoulder. Everything I believed about my past suddenly felt fragile. Before I could ask another question, Damian's phone vibrated again. Marcus answered first through the vehicle speaker. Boss, we've got movement. What kind? A silver SUV. It's been following us for the last 6 intersections. The warmth inside the vehicle vanished instantly. Damian looked calmly through the rear window. Then his expression hardened. They found us sooner than I expected. He reached for the radio. Changed the route. No panic. No raised voice. Just one quiet command. Because the hunt that had begun 22 years earlier had finally caught up with us. The greatest act of protection isn't winning every battle. It's making sure the people you love never have to fight one. The convoy turned sharply onto a narrow industrial road. The silver SUV followed. Not too close. Not too far. Always there. Marcus watched it through the side mirror. They're keeping their distance. Damian nodded. They're waiting for confirmation. Should we lose them? No. His answer surprised everyone. Let them believe they're still in control. The bodyguard said nothing else. He trusted Damian completely. I wished I could do the same. Where are we going? I finally asked. My home. The words settled between us. I don't know you. I know. And you're asking me to bring my son into your house. I'm asking you to bring him somewhere no one can enter without my permission. I folded my arms. Those aren't the same thing. For the first time since we met. Damian smiled. Not because I had challenged him. Because I had. You remind me of someone. I looked away. I don't want to remind you of anyone. I know. His voice carried no disappointment. Only understanding. The SUV slowed before a pair of towering iron gates. Security cameras turned silently toward us. The gates opened before the vehicles reached them. Beyond them stood an enormous stone estate hidden among centuries-old oak trees. Elegant. Quiet. Completely isolated from the city. Noah slowly opened his eyes. Mom. He rubbed them sleepily. Is this a castle? Despite everything. I smiled. It does look like one. Damian glanced toward Noah. I used to think so too. You lived here when you were little? No. His eyes rested on the mansion. I inherited it. There was sadness behind those words. As though every room carried memories he had never managed to leave behind. The convoy stopped beneath a covered entrance. Before I could open my door, Damian stepped outside. Rain immediately soaked the shoulders of his dark coat. He opened my door without saying a word. Not demanding. Not dramatic. Simply waiting. I stepped out with Noah. A woman in her 60s hurried toward us from the front entrance. Silver hair. Kind eyes. A warm smile that somehow made the enormous mansion feel less intimidating. Mr. Russo. She nodded politely. You made it home. Then she looked at me. You must be Olivia. I blinked. You know my name? I prepared your room. Room. Not rooms. Separate. I noticed the detail immediately. She crouched beside Noah. And who is this handsome young man? I'm Noah. What a wonderful name. She smiled. I'm Elena. Noah smiled back without hesitation. I like your house. She laughed softly. So do I. Damian looked toward Marcus. The perimeter? Locked down. No movement inside. Good. He turned back to me. You'll be safe here. Before I could answer, one of the security officers hurried across the courtyard. His pace was faster than everyone else's. Urgent. He handed Damian a tablet. Damian read the screen. His expression didn't change. But his eyes did. What is it? I asked quietly. He looked at me for several long seconds, then handed me the tablet. A security image filled the display. Someone had entered my apartment building less than 20 minutes earlier. 3 men. Dark jackets. Baseball caps. One carried a small black case. The timestamp confirmed everything. If Noah and I had gone home, we would have arrived only minutes before they did. I felt my legs weaken. They weren't following you. I whispered. They were waiting for me. Damian nodded once. Yes. A cold realization settled over me. This wasn't about a restaurant, or a forgotten lullaby, or even a photograph from 22 years ago. Someone had expected me to survive long enough to be found. I looked at Damian with tears threatening to fall. Tell me the truth. All of it. No more pieces. No more riddles. He held my gaze, then gave a slow nod. You deserve that. He looked toward the mansion. Everything begins tonight. And when I'm finished, he paused. You'll understand why hearing you speak Italian changed both our lives forever. The people we become are shaped by the truths we survive, not the lies we were told. Elena led Noah upstairs. I'll make him something warm to eat. Noah looked back at me. You'll still be here? I smiled, though my heart was anything but calm. I promise. He nodded and disappeared around the corner, still clutching his backpack. The moment he was out of sight, the mansion fell strangely quiet. Damian gestured toward a small library overlooking the rain-covered gardens. Come with me. The room smelled of old books and cedar wood. A fire burned quietly in the stone fireplace. For the first time all day, there were no bodyguards, no phones, no interruptions, only the two of us. Damian walked to a wooden cabinet and removed a worn leather box. He placed it carefully on the table between us. I've carried this for 22 years. He opened the lid. Inside were photographs, letters, a tiny silver bracelet. and a faded hospital wristband. He handed me the bracelet first. My breath caught. On the inside, 2 tiny initials had been engraved. O.M. I frowned. My name starts with O. Olivia. He nodded. It wasn't always Olivia. I looked up. What? He slid an old birth record across the table. The paper had yellowed with age. The ink was fading. At the top, a single name. Aurora Maria Bellini. Date of birth. Exactly mine. My hands began to tremble. This. It can't be. It can. He spoke softly. Because that was the name Isabella chose before you were born. I stared at the document. Every detail matched. The date. The hospital. Even the small birthmark recorded on the infant's left shoulder. The same birthmark I had carried my entire life. Tears blurred the words. My grandmother. She never wanted to erase your past. Damian sat across from me. She wanted you to survive long enough to choose your own future. I couldn't speak. Every memory of the woman who had raised me returned at once. The lullabies. The Italian words. The stories she stopped telling whenever I asked too many questions. She hadn't been hiding me from my family. She had been hiding me from the people who destroyed it. I covered my face with trembling hands. I spent my whole life wondering why I never belonged anywhere. Damian remained silent. Sometimes silence was the greatest kindness. After several moments, I looked at him. You searched for me. For 22 years. Yes. Why didn't you stop? He smiled faintly. Because promises don't expire. I laughed through my tears. My grandmother used to say something like that. I'm not surprised. He stood and walked toward the rain-covered window. Isabella once saved a frightened 14-year-old boy. I spent the rest of my life trying to become the kind of man who deserved that gift. I joined him by the window. You became someone people fear. Yes. So no one could ever hurt the people I failed to protect again. His honesty carried no pride. Only acceptance. Downstairs, laughter echoed softly through the mansion. Noah. Elena had probably found him cookies. For the first time all day, he sounded completely safe. I looked toward the sound, then back at Damian. What happens now? He answered without hesitation. Now, you choose. You can leave tomorrow. I'll never stop you. I'll give you every document, every answer, and enough protection to start over anywhere in the world. I searched his face. There was no demand, no expectation, only respect. And if I stay, his blue eyes softened. Then this house becomes a home again. A tear escaped before I could stop it. Outside, the storm finally began to pass. A thin ray of evening sunlight broke through the clouds, casting warm light across the old stone floors. For 22 years, a frightened little girl had lived under a borrowed name. For 22 years, a lonely man had carried a promise made to her mother. Neither of us had expected an ordinary afternoon in a neighborhood restaurant to change everything. Yet sometimes destiny doesn't arrive with miracles. Sometimes it begins with a single mother comforting her son in a language she never knew was leading her home.